Well, good morning. So, do you ever get on the internet and trying to click a news article and then it gets you to another news article and then you go to another news article and then 10 minutes later you're reading a news article that you never thought you'd be reading? Has it ever happened to anybody? Yeah, no, okay, all right. So only me, all right, that's good to know. All right. I was looking for anything, any kind of news other than the new elected president, if there were any news out there, and so I found it. And I'm going to share it with you this morning. You'll understand in a minute how far I went. So I found out about the myna bird. Have you ever heard about the myna bird? The myna bird is a Asian species of bird that was shipped from Asia to the zoo in Israel. And it got to the zoo in Israel, and they had these birds on display, and these birds escaped from the zoo in the nation of Israel. You don't even ask how I got to this article, but it's all going to make sense in just a minute. So I'm reading about this, and the article has nothing to do with this bird. It has to do with this bird, but anyway, sorry. I digress. It's 8 o'clock. I need another cup of coffee. All right, so this bird, and so what's happened in Israel, this myna bird that escaped started to take over, it has proliferated and multiplied, and the thing about the myna bird is that it attacks other birds and takes over their nests. And so over the past 20 years, they have taken over as a dominant species of birds within the nation of Israel. All it took was a couple birds, 2, 3, 4 birds in the zoo that got out, and now they're a major problem in the nation of Israel. They're all over the place. They don't belong there, and they're also running the other species out. They're taking over this territory. And I think about that because we just heard a gospel lesson about a man who got invaded, taken over. He was invaded literally, and then all it took was maybe one little thing, one little piece, and it starts out just one small way. And isn't that the way sin works in our lives? Isn't that the way addiction works? It doesn't start out just real big. It always starts out with one little thing, you know. I remember being in Costa Rica and getting up in the morning, and I was 29 years of age. I didn't drink coffee at the time, but I developed my caffeine addiction in Costa Rica. Because in the morning, I would get up and I'd smell this fresh, mountain-grown coffee brewing, and that was the only thing they served. It was either that or water at breakfast in Costa Rica on a mission trip. And so one morning, I decided to try this liquid gold. And so I got up and I tried it. No creamer, no sugar, nothing. Straight up, right? So pure and rich and really good. I mean, you could taste the coffee. I'd never liked coffee before that moment. So the next morning, I had another cup of coffee. By the end of the mission trip, I was packing as much coffee as I could into my suitcase, thinking, what's the custom limit? What is the limit I can go through customs and not have to declare this coffee? You know, I became a caffeine smuggler at this point. I went from one cup of coffee to now I'm smuggling it back into the U.S. My daughter went to Costa Rica last year. You know what I told her to do when she came back? Bring back the coffee, right? She said, well, how much do you want? As much as you can put in your luggage. How anybody else have a caffeine? Am I alone in my caffeine addiction too? No? Right? Had a cup of coffee this morning, right? And so I think about that. So we can laugh about that kind of addiction because it doesn't really take over my whole life. But it does, in some ways, it changes how I spend some money and it changes some behavior. But it has become an addiction for some of us. And that's without Starbucks, folks. Now we foo-foo it now. But, you know, others of us, we have other addictions. We all have addictions. Work can be an addiction. And when does that work addiction start? Doesn't it start the moment we get the first accolade, the first pat on the back, the first bonus, the first award, and then we want another one, and another one, and another one, and we start to pursue more and more success, so we work harder. Or how about alcohol? Alcohol addiction starts with usually one drink, and then 2 drinks, and 3 drinks. Then I got to have more drinks. A person has to have more drinks to get that same feeling that they got with the first or second one. And so it becomes an addiction. It takes over their lives. Drug addiction starts with just one high, one great high, and then they want another one and another one and another one. And so that addiction starts that way. A shopping addiction starts the moment, the thrill of that first deal, that first bargain. And then you think, oh, I can work this system. I want another deal. I want another bargain, right? And so we begin spending more and more money than we ever would have before because we're running from one deal to one bargain to the next. And then there's some folks that struggle. They click on that website just one time and see something that they shouldn't see, but then they keep thinking about it and they keep going back again and again, and then the more and the more and the more. And just like you clicked on the news article, it just leads down this bunny trail. We all wrestle with something that comes into our lives like the minor bird and takes over. Moves God out of the neighborhood, moves God away from our souls, and takes over. That's why Proverbs taught us. Proverbs 4:23 says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. That we're to guard our hearts. Another version says we're to protect our hearts. We're to keep it vigilant, like a guard on a tower, 24/7 watch, always looking out for the enemy to come in and making sure there's an alarm sounded every time. But we don't really sound alarms when it comes to some of these things. We just let them on in. But we're to keep vigilant, it says. And I can imagine the man we heard about this morning, that at some point something was going on in his life, we don't know, but at some point he let the demons in. Now, I don't know what you think of demon possession. Whatever we may think about demon possession today doesn't really matter, because for this man, it was real. He had been taken over. His spirit had been taken over by something else. He wasn't just dirt poor spiritually. He was dead spiritually and taken over. He had been overrun by what is called not just one demon, but what's called legion in the text. Now, it's interesting that before Jesus came over to meet him, Jesus had just been on the Sea of Galilee the day before, the night before, with his disciples. They had come from Galilee and they were crossing the lake. And in that night crossing, there arose a storm. And Jesus stood up in that boat with his disciples afraid and cowering in the boat. And Jesus stood up and he commanded and he calmed the wind and the waves, and he said, "Peace, be still." And they were amazed at his authority over the wind and the waves. So now he gets over to the other side of the lake, to this man who is living in a graveyard among the tombs. He is naked and he is homeless and he is possessed by something that has taken over his life, changed who he is. Closest thing I've seen to this in our day, I actually saw a few months ago when my daughter and I was driving her back from a doctor's appointment at University of Maryland Medical Center, and we were driving back through the city of Baltimore, and we were stopped at a light, and I saw this young woman stumble out of the alleyway and unfold a cardboard sign that said, "Homeless, need help, anything, give anything you can." But I could tell that as she stumbled out of the alley and walked up to the light and opened up her sign, that she was having a hard time just keeping her eyelids open, and she was shaking, and she kept almost falling over. And I knew these were signs of a heroin addiction. And so I could see that what was happening, and at least my assumption was that she was looking for the cash to get her next high. She had been taken over. Heroin had taken over her life. And I found out later that Baltimore City is considered the U.S. heroin capital. 1 out of every 10 people in Baltimore is struggling with a heroin addiction. And I know that my brother, as a police officer, now has to carry a shot around with him for people that have OD'd on heroin so that they can inject them and save their lives. And so this addiction is the closest thing I can think of to demon possession. I mean, if you saw someone not in their true selves and shaking and couldn't stand up, it's like she was possessed by something else. And it was her addiction. It had literally taken over her life. It had literally changed who she was. I can't compare anything. That's the only thing that I can compare it to. And that's exactly the state that this man was in. It says, for many a time it had seized him. He was kept under guard and bound with chains and shackles, but he would break the bonds and be driven by the demon into the desert. It's interesting, that word driven there, Greek word, literally refers to a wind driving a boat, a sailboat. What did Jesus just do the night before? He just said to the wind, "Peace be still." And now he comes to a man, and he not only has authority over the wind and the waves, but he has authority over what drives the man. And Jesus has authority over what drives us, what takes over our lives as well. That's good news, folks. So this man comes, and he is the same person who could calm the storm outside the boat, can calm the storm that is going on inside of his life right now. Now, I think it's interesting that when the demons recognize Jesus, and they readily recognize Jesus, they know exactly who Jesus is. They don't believe and they don't follow him, believe in him, put their faith in him, but they know who he is, right? Do we have possession going on over here? Okay. It would be Spencer. Yeah, it would be, right? Sorry. I like picking on him. Sorry, that's my fault. He picks on me too, so don't worry about it. So, in this thing where think about how the demons recognize Jesus, and then they say to him, "All right, Jesus, we know who you are. Can we negotiate terms of surrender here?" Do you notice that? It's like they want to, don't torment us, don't send us to the abyss. How about this herd of pigs over here? They're trying to negotiate the terms of their surrender because they know Jesus has the authority and the power to drive them away. Something that we don't always believe or we forget, but they know it very well. And I find that when people come to me as pastor with confessing some darkness in their own lives, some sin that they're wrestling with, some addiction they're struggling with, I find that it's often a negotiation. I find that people come and confess, and it's good to confess, and it's good to get it off of our chest, but at the same time, I always see this negotiation going on. They're always coming to me and saying, "Well, can I just keep some of it in my life? Do I have to let all of it go? Can I just, everything in moderation, Could you say that to a heroin addict? You don't say to a heroin addict, everything in moderation. You can't moderate a heroin addiction. In fact, you can't moderate addiction at all. Addiction, something's taken over, and the only way to deal with it is to get rid of it, to evict it. And that's really what's going on here. Jesus is about to give them their eviction notice. And they're trying to negotiate the terms of their lease. Well, okay, if we can't have this apartment, can we move over to this one? Do we have to pay as much rent over here? Do we have to, they're trying to renegotiate the lease. And I find that when it comes to our own sin, when it comes to our own behavior, when it comes to our own addiction, we're often trying to negotiate it, aren't we? How can I just moderate? How can I just hold on to some of it? And then we wonder why we never get free. It's because we're always trying to negotiate the lease rather than allow Jesus to bring the eviction. There are some things that need to be evicted out of our lives, and we cannot do it on our own, but Jesus has the authority and power to do it. And we really can't do it without him. We need the one who can evict. We need the landlord of our souls to come and to evict. Jesus is the landlord of our souls, especially if we've given our lives to him. There's no negotiation here. It says that after the demons flee into the pigs, that the people hear about it, and they come and check out what's happened. And what do they discover? Notice what they discover. They discover this man sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. He had gone from homeless, naked, and possessed to now he is clothed, sitting at the feet of Jesus, and in his right mind. Now, literally, the Greek means there, he was in his senses. He was in his senses again. Now, if you were here a couple weeks ago, I talked about the prodigal son coming back to himself, coming to his senses. Same idea here. He had come back to himself. He was who God created him to be because he no longer had been taken over. He had become again his true self. You see, our souls can be naked and homeless and taken over. And we need to reclothe them. We need to be sitting again at the feet of Jesus and allowing him to be the Lord and Savior of our lives. And then we find ourselves back to who we are, who we really are, our true selves. Richard Rohr says it this way. He says, your true self is who you are in God from all eternity. Your true self has nothing to do with your temperament, Myers-Briggs type, nationality, race, or religious denomination. Those are all your false self. Your true self is who you are in God. Who you are when you're with God. Who you are when your soul is present to God. Who you are with the eternal God, because our souls are the one thing that are eternal. Everything else is going away, folks. Everything else is wasting away. It's not going to be around forever. But our soul's eternal. It's who we are in God. And why not make sure they're whole? Why not guard our hearts? Why not be vigilant about them? Why not protect them if they are so valuable to God? They should be valuable to us. Are you taking care of your soul? Are you taking care of you? Are you allowing Jesus to take care of you? The Good Shepherd? Are you sitting at his feet? Why do you think he's sitting there anyway? Why do you think the man is sitting at the feet of Jesus? I think because he's afraid the demons will come back. He wants to be as close to Jesus as possible. He wants to be as close as possible to the one who has the authority and power to make sure they never come back. There's good news, though. You know, Jesus actually sends him away at the end of the story. You heard that, right? Now, it's not that Jesus is not compassionate. It's not that Jesus is not empathizing with what's going on. But he knows that this man is cured. He knows they're gone once and for all. And I think part of the reason Jesus allows them to go into the pigs and run down the hillside and drown is not because Jesus needed to see that. He needed to see it. He needed to know that they were gone. He needed a visible manifestation that the demons had entered something else and checked out of his house and gone somewhere and died. He needed that. And Jesus gave it to him so that he could remember that when he went to preach the gospel to the towns of his region. But Jesus sends him away. Why not stay at the feet of Jesus? Why not stay with the one who has the authority and power? Because Jesus knows something that he has yet to believe. Jesus knows that he's cured. He just needs to live that out, you know. He needs to see it. He needs to live it for himself. He needs to not only believe it and experience it, but he needs to go live his life and realize that's not coming back. He needs to recognize that. And the good news is that blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus knows the kingdom of heaven is his. He has nothing to fear. You and I have nothing to fear because the kingdom of heaven is ours when we're poor in our spirits. I'm going to close with just sharing a quote I came across this week. Didn't plan to come across this quote, was reading a book and just fit so well. You know when that happens, you just got to go with it. It's from a book that I picked up again called The Unshakable Kingdom by E. Stanley Jones. He was a missiologist. I'm going to read the whole quote to you, but you're going to get the second half because that's really the part I want you to remember. But he's actually talking about this beatitude, about being poor in spirit. He says this, he says, be poor enough to receive, and everything is open to you. Above all, the very kingdom of heaven belongs to you. Not that you belong to the kingdom of heaven, you do, but more astounding still, the kingdom of heaven belongs to you. All its resources, all its forgiveness, all its power, all its everything belong to you if you are poor enough to receive it. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for the unshakable kingdom is theirs. Amen.